A chance encounter. The rain drummed against the windows of Rosewood Family Diner as James Mitchell pulled into the parking lot, his hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. In the back seat, his 6-year-old twins, Lily and Lucy, chattered excitedly about their upcoming dinner adventure. He had promised them a special night out after another long week of board meetings and conference calls that kept him away from home too often. James checked his reflection in the rear view mirror, straightening his simple navy sweater. Tonight, he had deliberately chosen casual clothes instead of his usual tailored suits. He wanted to be just a dad, not the CEO of Mitchell Technologies, whose face graced business magazines. The past 3 years since losing his wife Sarah had been a constant balance between building his empire and raising his daughters alone. "Daddy, can we get the chocolate pancakes for dinner?" Lucy asked, bouncing in her car seat with excitement. "We'll see what they have, sweetheart," James replied, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Remember, we're trying new foods tonight." The diner was warm and inviting, filled with the comforting aroma of home-cooked meals and freshly baked bread. Red vinyl booths lined the windows, and the walls were decorated with vintage photographs of the town's history. It was exactly the kind of place James rarely visited, but had always imagined taking his family to for simple, honest meals as they waited to be seated. James noticed how the twins pressed their noses against the glass case, displaying pies and cakes. Their wonder at such simple pleasures reminded him of what truly mattered in life. Success meant nothing if he couldn't share these moments with the people he loved most. Meeting Ruby Chen hurried between tables, her order pad tucked into her apron pocket as she served steaming plates of comfort food to the evening crowd. She had been working at Rosewood Diner for 2 years, saving every tip to pay for her social work degree at the local college. Her long black hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and despite being on her feet for hours, her smile remained genuine and warm. She loved this job because it allowed her to connect with people from all walks of life. Every customer had a story. Ruby found joy in making their dining experience a little brighter. Whether through remembering their favorite order or simply listening when they needed someone to talk to. When the hostess seated the handsome man and his 2 adorable daughters at table 7 in her section, Ruby couldn't help but smile. The girls were practically identical, with curly brown hair and bright green eyes that sparkled with mischief. Their father looked tired but devoted, the kind of exhaustion that came from caring deeply about others. "Good evening, I'm Ruby and I'll be taking care of you tonight," she said, approaching their table with menus. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" "Chocolate milk." Both girls exclaimed in unison, then dissolved into giggles. James chuckled, and Ruby noticed how his whole face transformed when he smiled. "2 chocolate milks and a coffee for me, please?" "Coming right up," Ruby said, but instead of rushing away, she knelt down to the girl's level. "I love your matching outfits. Are you twins?" Lily nodded enthusiastically. "I'm Lily and this is Lucy. We're 6 years old and we go to Oakwood Elementary." "That's wonderful," Ruby replied. "I bet you're both very smart and help each other with everything we do," Lucy chimed in. "Lily helps me tie my shoes and I help her reach the high shelves." James watched this interaction with growing amazement. Most people were polite to his daughters, but Ruby seemed genuinely interested in what they had to say. She wasn't talking down to them or rushing through pleasantries. She was treating them like real people whose thoughts and feelings mattered. The dinner unfolds as the evening progressed. Ruby found herself spending more time at table 7 than she probably should have. Every time she checked on them, the girls had new stories to share or questions to ask. They told her about their pet goldfish named Bubbles, their favorite books, their dreams of becoming astronauts who would explore the moon together. James ordered the meatloaf special, while the twins chose chicken fingers and fries. When their food arrived, Ruby noticed James cutting up the girls' chicken into smaller pieces and ensuring they had everything they needed before touching his own meal. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes about the kind of father he was. "You're really good with them," Ruby commented when she stopped by to refill his coffee. "They're my whole world," James replied simply. "Their mother passed away 3 years ago, so it's just been the 3 of us figuring everything out together." Ruby felt her heart squeeze with sympathy. I'm so sorry for your loss. You're lucky to have a dad who cares so much. Some days I wonder if I'm doing enough, James admitted, watching as Lily helped Lucy open her packet of ketchup. I try to give them everything they need, but I worry I'm failing them somehow. Are you kidding? Ruby sat down in the empty chair across from him for just a moment. Look at them. They're confident, kind, and clearly adore you. Whatever you're doing, it's working. James felt something shift inside his chest. When was the last time someone had reassured him about his parenting? When had someone last looked at his daughters and seen what he saw? Instead of just being polite or trying to impress him because of his wealth. The magic moment as dinner wound down, the girls became increasingly sleepy, leaning against their father's arms while he finished his coffee. Ruby brought them crayons and coloring sheets from behind the counter, which perked them up enough to create masterpieces featuring purple dinosaurs and rainbow castles. For you, Lily said shyly, presenting Ruby with a drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands. That's me, Lucy, and you. This is beautiful, Ruby said, genuinely touched. I'm going to put this somewhere special so I can look at it every day. Lucy tugged on Ruby's apron. Will you be our friend? Before Ruby could answer, James intervened gently. Girls, Ruby has work to do and other customers to help. We can't take up all her time, but she's nice, Lily protested. Our stories. I do like your stories very much, Ruby assured them, and I would love to be your friend. When it came time for the check, James reached for his wallet, but something made him hesitate. All evening, Ruby had treated them not like potential sources of a big tip, but like people she genuinely enjoyed being around. She hadn't asked about his work, his car, or where they lived. She had simply been present, kind, and authentic. He left a generous tip, but not so large as to seem showy. As they prepared to leave, both girls hugged Ruby goodbye, something they rarely did with strangers. James shook her hand, surprised by how reluctant he was to let go. Thank you for making this such a special evening, he said. The girls will be talking about their new friend Ruby for weeks. The pleasure was all mine, Ruby replied, and she meant it. I hope you'll come back soon. As the Mitchell family walked to their car, James found himself glancing back at the diner where Ruby was already clearing their table, carefully folding the girl's artwork to take with her. Something about this evening felt different, significant in a way he couldn't quite explain. For the first time in 3 years, he wondered if it was possible to open his heart again, not for himself but for his daughters, who deserved to see what love looked like when it was real, honest, and built on mutual respect rather than convenience or expectation. The rain had stopped. The stars were beginning to appear through the breaking clouds. As he buckled the twins into their car seats, James made a mental note of the diner's hours. Perhaps they would become regular customers. Perhaps friendship could grow into something more beautiful than either of them dared to imagine. Ruby watched through the window as their car pulled away, her heart feeling strangely full. She had served hundreds of families over the years, but something about James and his daughters felt special. The way he looked at them with such devotion, the way they trusted and adored him completely, painted a picture of love that was both heartbreaking and beautiful. She carefully tucked Lily's drawing into her apron pocket, already looking forward to the possibility of seeing them again. Would you like me to continue with part 2? Secrets behind designer clothes? The morning after Ruby woke up in her small studio apartment with Lily's drawing still on her nightstand. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, illuminating the modest space she shared with her younger brother Tommy. At 19, Tommy was a senior in high school with dreams of becoming a veterinarian, dreams that Ruby worked tirelessly to support after their parents died in a car accident 5 years ago. You're up early for someone who worked until midnight, Tommy said, emerging. From the tiny kitchen with 2 cups of instant coffee, his dark hair was messy from sleep, but his eyes held the same kindness that Ruby possessed. Couldn't sleep much, Ruby admitted, accepting the warm mug gratefully. Had an interesting table last night. A single dad with twin girls. There was something special about them. Tommy raised an eyebrow. Special how? Did he tip well? Ruby laughed, shaking her head. Not everything is about money, Tommy. He was just real, and his daughters were adorable. They drew me a picture. She showed him the stick figure drawing, and Tommy's expression softened. Since their parents' death, Ruby had been more like a mother to him than a sister, sacrificing her own social life to ensure he had everything he needed. He worried that she was too focused on taking care of others to take care of herself. "Maybe you should see if they come back," Tommy suggested. "You deserve some happiness, Ruby. You've earned it." Meanwhile, across town in the prestigious Hillcrest, neighborhood James was dealing with a very different morning conversation. His mother, Margaret Stone, sat rigidly in his marble-floored kitchen, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. She had arrived unannounced, as was her habit, to check on her granddaughters and critique James's parenting choices. "The girls need structure, James," Margaret declared, watching as Lily and Lucy ate cereal at the enormous granite island. "Not adventures to common diners. What if someone recognized you? What if there were photographers?" James poured himself coffee from the expensive espresso machine, his jaw tightening with familiar frustration. Their children, mother, need normalcy, not red carpet events. "They're Mitchell children," Margaret corrected sharply. "They have a legacy to uphold." Sarah understood that. The mention of his late wife made James's chest ache. Sarah had indeed understood the social expectations that came with wealth, but she had also understood that their daughters needed to grow up grounded in real values. She would have loved the simple joy of last night's dinner. "Daddy, when can we see Ruby again?" Lucy asked innocently, swinging her legs from the high stool. Margaret's eyebrows shot up. "Ruby? Who is Ruby?" "She's our new friend at the diner," Lily explained enthusiastically. "She likes our pictures, and she has pretty hair, and she's really nice." James watched his mother's expression grow increasingly disapproving. "James, surely, you're not involving the children in your social experiments." "We had dinner, Mother. Nothing more." But even as he said it, James knew it wasn't entirely true. Something had shifted inside him last night. Something his mother would never understand: college dreams and hidden struggles later that day. Ruby sat in Dr. Amanda Foster's office at Riverside Community College, reviewing her social work coursework. Dr. Foster, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair, had become both professor and mentor to Ruby over the past 2 years. "Your essay on family dynamics in crisis situations is excellent," Dr. Foster said, handing back the graded paper. "You have a natural understanding of how trauma affects children. Have you considered specializing in family counseling?" "I'd love to," Ruby replied, "but I'm not sure I can afford the additional certification programs. Tommy starts college next year, and between tuition and living expenses." Dr. Foster leaned forward, her expression concerned. "Ruby, you can't sacrifice your entire future for your brother's education. There are scholarships, grants, work-study programs. Tommy is my responsibility," Ruby said firmly. "Our parents would have wanted him to have every opportunity. I can wait." "Your parents would have wanted you to have opportunities too," Dr. Foster pointed out gently. "They would want both their children to thrive." As Ruby walked across campus later, her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend, Hannah Brooks, who was studying nursing at the same college. "Coffee break? I have gossip and you look like you need chocolate." They met at the campus cafe, where Hannah immediately launched into her favorite topic, Ruby's non-existent love life. "You're 23 years old, and you act like a nun," Hannah declared, stirring extra sugar into her latte. "When was the last time you went on a date? And don't say that disaster with the accounting major last semester." "I'm focused on school and work," Ruby protested. I don't have time for dating." "Everyone has time for dating if they make it a priority," Hannah argued. "What about that cute guy from your sociology class? Or the barista who always gives you extra whipped cream?" Ruby thought about James and his daughters, about the way her heart had fluttered when he smiled, about how natural it felt to talk with him. But what was the point of entertaining such thoughts? He was clearly successful, probably married to his career if not to another person, and she was just a waitress putting herself through school. "Hey, there was someone last night," Ruby admitted reluctantly. "A customer at the diner. But it's complicated." Hannah's eyes lit up. "Complicated how? Married, criminal record? Secret identity as a superhero?" He's a single dad, Ruby said, and he seems out of my league. Honey, no one is out of your league, Hannah said firmly. You're smart, beautiful, and have the biggest heart of anyone I know. If you can't see that, he's not worth your time. Business world intrusion that afternoon. James sat in his glass-walled office on the 32nd floor of the Mitchell Technologies building, trying to focus on quarterly reports. His business partner and longtime friend, Robert Kim, knocked on the door before entering with his usual stack of documents requiring James's attention. You seem distracted today, Robert observed, settling into one of the leather chairs across from James's desk. Everything okay with the girls? James and Robert had been friends since college. Robert was one of the few people who truly understood the pressure. James felt balancing fatherhood with running a multinational technology company. Robert's own wife and 2 children kept him grounded in similar ways. The girls are fine, James said. Better than fine, actually. We had dinner at this little diner last night, and they were so happy. It made me realize how rarely I see them that carefree. That's good, Robert said carefully. But I sense there's more to the story. James hesitated, then found himself describing Ruby, her genuine kindness to his daughters, the way she had made him feel seen as a person rather than a business entity. Robert listened without judgment, having known James long enough to recognize when something significant was happening. She sounds special, Robert said when James finished. Are you going to see her again? I don't know, James admitted. Complicated. The girls are asking about her, but what if I'm reading too much into a simple professional interaction? What if she was just being nice because it's her job? Or, Robert suggested, what if she was being nice because she's actually nice? James, you've been alone for 3 years. The girls need to see that it's possible to love again, to build new relationships while honoring Sarah's memory. Before James could respond, his secretary buzzed in. Mr. Mitchell, your mother is here to see you. James sighed, exchanging a look with Robert. Margaret's unannounced visits to his office usually meant she had something important to say, something she preferred to discuss without the girls present. Margaret entered wearing her usual armor of designer clothing and pearl jewelry. Her expression, Serious, James, we need to discuss your recent choices. Taking the girls to public establishments, allowing them to form attachments to service workers, it's not appropriate. Mother, they're children who enjoyed a simple dinner out, James said, his patience wearing thin. They're Mitchell children, Margaret repeated her earlier refrain. People notice them. People talk. What happens when this waitress realizes who you are and decides to exploit the connection? What happens when she starts demanding money or selling stories to tabloids? Robert shifted uncomfortably in his chair, recognizing the tension between James and his mother. This was a familiar battle, one that had intensified since Sarah's death. Not everyone is motivated by money, Mother, James said quietly. Everyone has a price, James. The sooner you accept that, the better protected you and the girls will be. After Margaret left, James stared out his office window at the city below. Somewhere out there, Ruby was probably finishing her college classes or preparing for her evening shift at the diner. Was his mother right? Was he being naive to think that someone could care about him and his daughters without ulterior motives? The second encounter, 3 days later, James found himself driving toward Rosewood Diner again, the twins chattering excitedly in the back seat. He had tried to convince himself that returning was about giving the girls a treat, but he knew the truth. He wanted to see Ruby again, to determine if the connection he had felt was real or imagined. The diner was busier than their first visit, filled with families enjoying the weekend dinner rush. James's heart sank when he didn't immediately see Ruby. But then she emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of steaming plates, her face lighting up when she spotted them. My favorite customers are back, she said warmly, approaching their table. How are my artist friends doing? We made you more pictures, Lily announced, pulling folded papers from her small purse. This one is a rainbow, and this one is our house. Ruby examined each drawing with the same attention she might give a museum masterpiece. These are incredible. I'm running out of space on my refrigerator because I'm keeping all your artwork. James watched this interaction, noting how Ruby remembered details about the girls, how she genuinely seemed excited to see them. When she took their drink orders, she remembered that he liked his coffee black and that the twins preferred chocolate milk. As the evening progressed, James learned more about Ruby through casual conversation. She was studying social work. She lived with her younger brother. She had grown up in the same small town where the diner was located. She was working her way through college, determined to help children and families facing difficult situations. "That's noble work," James said when she mentioned her career goals. "The world needs more people who care about helping others." "I've seen what happens when children don't have advocates," Ruby replied, her expression growing serious. "Everyone deserves someone who believes in them, who fights for them when they can't fight for themselves." James heard the personal experience underlying her words, and he found himself wanting to know more about what had shaped her compassionate worldview. But before he could ask, Ruby was called away to handle another table's urgent request. When she returned with their dessert, James made a decision that surprised him. "Ruby, would you like to join us for coffee sometime? When you're not working, I mean? The girls would love to see you outside of the diner, and He paused suddenly. "Nervous? I'd like to get to know you better." Ruby's cheeks flushed pink, and for a moment she seemed speechless. That sounds nice," she said finally. "But I should probably mention that I don't have a car. I take the bus everywhere. That's not a problem," James assured her. "We could meet somewhere convenient for you, or I could pick you up. Whatever works best." As they exchanged phone numbers, James felt like a teenager again, nervous and excited about the possibility of something new. Ruby's smile was radiant, and even the twins seemed to sense that something special was happening. "Does this mean Ruby is going to be our friend forever?" Lucy asked, as they prepared to leave. "I hope so, sweetheart," James replied, surprising himself with how much he meant it. The coffee date that changed everything the following Saturday morning, James found himself more nervous than he had been before any business presentation. He had arranged to meet Ruby at a small cafe near the college campus, choosing a location that felt neutral and comfortable rather than intimidating. The twins were spending the morning with Robert's family, giving James and Ruby a chance to talk without interruption. Ruby arrived exactly on time, wearing a simple blue dress and carrying the canvas bag she used for school. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and she looked beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with expensive clothes or professional styling. James stood as she approached, feeling slightly overdressed in his button-down shirt and khakis. "I hope I'm not late," Ruby said, slightly breathless. The bus was running behind schedule. "You're perfect," James replied, then immediately felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I mean, your timing is perfect. You look lovely," they ordered coffee and found a quiet table by the window, where morning sunlight painted everything in golden hues. For the first few minutes, conversation felt slightly awkward as they navigated the transition from customer-server relationship to something more personal. "Tell me about your family," James said, stirring his coffee. "You mentioned a younger brother." Ruby's face brightened as she talked about Tommy, his dreams of becoming a veterinarian, his academic achievements, despite the challenges they had faced. She spoke about their parents' death with quiet sadness, explaining how she had dropped out of college initially to support Tommy through high school before eventually returning to pursue her own education. "He's brilliant," Ruby said proudly. "Much smarter than I ever was. He deserves every opportunity, even if it means I have to work a little harder to make it happen." James was struck by her selflessness, by the way she had sacrificed her own immediate goals to ensure her brother's success. It reminded him of his own fierce protectiveness toward his daughters, the way parenthood changed your priorities completely. "What about your family?" Ruby asked. "Besides the girls, I mean. Do they have grandparents, aunts, uncles?" James hesitated, unsure how much to reveal about his complicated relationship with his mother, about the wealth that created barriers between him and most people. "My mother is very involved in the girls' lives," he said carefully. "She has strong opinions about how they should be raised." "That can be challenging," Ruby said diplomatically. "But it's nice that they have extended family who care about them." The conversation flowed more easily as they discovered shared values about family, education, and the importance of kindness in an often harsh world. Ruby talked about her work at the diner, how she enjoyed connecting with customers and making their day a little brighter. James found himself sharing stories about his daughters, about the funny things they said and did, about his fears of not being enough for them. "You're an amazing father," Ruby said softly. "Anyone can see how much you love them. That's the most important thing children need." As the morning stretched on, James realized he hadn't thought about work, about stock prices or board meetings or quarterly projections, for hours. Ruby's presence was calming and energizing at the same time, making him feel like the best version of himself. The truth comes out, their second official date took place at a local park, where James pushed the twins on swings while Ruby sat on nearby bench reading them stories from a book she had brought. Watching her with Lily and Lucy, seeing how naturally she interacted with them, James felt something shift permanently in his heart. "Daddy, can Ruby come to our house sometime?" Lily asked as they walked toward the parking lot. "We could show her our room and our toys," Lucy added enthusiastically. James looked at Ruby questioningly, and she nodded with a warm smile. "I'd love to see where you live." The drive to James's house took them through increasingly upscale neighborhoods. Past manicured lawns and impressive gates, Ruby noticed the change in scenery, but didn't comment, assuming they were taking a scenic route or perhaps stopping somewhere.
All along the way.
When James pulled into the circular driveway of a massive colonial mansion, Ruby's eyes widened in confusion. "Are we visiting friends of yours?" she asked. "This is our house," Lily announced proudly as James helped her out of her car seat. Ruby stared at the imposing structure with its marble columns, perfectly landscaped gardens, and three-car garage. This wasn't the home of someone who needed to worry about paying bills or saving money for college tuition. This was the home of someone very wealthy. James saw her expression and felt his stomach drop. "Ruby, I should have told you earlier." "Should have explained what?" Ruby asked quietly, though she was beginning to understand. "I own a technology company," James said, his words rushing together. "Mitchell Technologies. It's been in my family for 2 generations, and it's grown quite large. I should have mentioned it before, but I liked that you didn't know. I liked being just a dad with you, not a CEO or a business contact or a potential opportunity." Ruby was silent as they walked toward the house, her mind reeling. She thought about every interaction they had shared, wondering if she had missed obvious signs of his wealth. The expensive watch he wore, the way he never seemed concerned about money, the casual confidence that came from never having to worry about basic necessities. The house's interior was even more impressive than the exterior, with soaring ceilings, original artwork, and furniture that probably cost more than Ruby's annual salary. The twins ran ahead to their playroom, leaving James and Ruby alone in the vast foyer. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ruby asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I was terrified you'd start seeing dollar signs instead of seeing me," James admitted. "Because every woman I've met since Sarah died has been more interested in my bank account than in my daughters or in who I am as a person." Ruby felt tears prick her eyes. "And you assumed I'd be the same way?" "No," James said quickly. "That's exactly the point. You were different from the beginning. You cared about Lily and Lucy. You listened to them. You made them feel important. You never asked about my work or my house or my car. You were interested in me as a person, and I didn't want to ruin that." Ruby walked to the window overlooking the backyard, where she could see an elaborate playground and swimming pool. "I don't know how to process this," she said honestly. "I've been worried about whether I could afford textbooks next semester, and you live in a palace. It's just a house, Ruby. It doesn't change who I am or how I feel about you, doesn't it?" Ruby turned to face him. "You've been evaluating me this whole time, testing whether I was worthy of your trust. You've been holding back a fundamental part of your life while I've been completely honest with you." James felt panic rising in his chest. "Ruby, please. I was trying to protect all of us. I've seen what money does to relationships, how it changes people's motivations." "And what about my motivations?" Ruby asked. "What about my feelings? Dude, you think I was so shallow that knowing about your wealth would suddenly make me fake?" Before James could answer, Margaret Stone appeared in the doorway. having let herself in through the side entrance as was her habit. She took in the scene with sharp eyes, immediately assessing Ruby's modest clothing and obvious distress. "James, I see you have a visitor," Margaret said coolly. "Perhaps you should introduce us." "Mother, this is Ruby Chen," James said reluctantly. "Ruby, this is my mother, Margaret Stone." Margaret extended a perfectly manicured hand, her smile polite but calculating. "Miss Chen, how lovely to meet you. James has mentioned that the girls enjoyed your service at the diner." And the emphasis on the word service made Ruby's cheeks burn with embarrassment. She suddenly felt acutely aware of her appearance, her second-hand dress and scuffed shoes in this opulent setting. "It's been lovely meeting your granddaughters," Ruby replied with dignity. "They're wonderful children." "Yes, they are, Margaret." "Agreed, which is why we're so careful about the influences in their lives. I'm sure you understand." The message was crystal clear, and Ruby felt her heart break a little more. She turned to James, whose face had gone pale with anger and embarrassment. "I should go," Ruby said quietly. "This was a mistake." "Ruby, wait," James started, but she was already walking toward the door. "Please don't call me," Ruby said without turning around. "I need time to think." The crisis that brings them together for 3 weeks, James tried to respect Ruby's request for space while dying inside. The twins asked about her constantly, and he found himself driving past the diner during her shifts, hoping to catch a glimpse of her through the windows. He had sent flowers with apologies, left voicemails explaining his mother's behavior, and even written a long letter that he never sent. Ruby threw herself into her studies and work, trying to forget the way James had looked at her, the way his daughters had made her feel like part of a family. She told herself it was better this way, that the gap between their worlds was too large to bridge. But late at night, she still wondered what might have been possible if he had trusted her from the beginning. Everything changed on a Tuesday evening when Ruby received a frantic phone call from Tommy's school. Her brother had collapsed during basketball practice and was being rushed to the hospital with symptoms that suggested appendicitis. Ruby's hand shook as she called for a taxi, praying that Tommy would be okay and terrified about how she would pay for emergency surgery if that's what he needed at the hospital. Ruby sat in the waiting room while Tommy underwent an emergency appendectomy. The surgeon assured her that the procedure had gone well, but Tommy would need several days of recovery and follow-up care. Ruby nodded and smiled, then asked to speak with someone about payment arrangements. The financial counselors. News was devastating. Even with Ruby's basic insurance, the costs would be enormous. Payment plans were available, but Ruby quickly realized she would have to drop out of school and work full-time to manage the debt. Everything she had worked for, everything she had dreamed of, suddenly seemed impossible. She was sitting by Tommy's bedside, holding his hand while he slept, when a familiar voice spoke from the doorway. "Ruby." She turned to see James standing there with Detective Mike Walsh, a family friend who had helped James navigate various challenges over the years. Both men looked concerned and slightly out of breath, as if they had rushed to get there. "Did you know?" Ruby asked, wiping tears from her eyes. "Dr. Foster called me," James explained. "She's worried about you and thought you might need support. Mike drove me here because I was too shaken to drive safely." Detective Walsh, a kind man in his 50s, stepped forward. "Miss Chen, I understand you're facing some financial challenges related to your brother's care. James asked me to look into resources that might be available." "I don't need charity," Ruby said quietly, though her voice lacked conviction. "It's not charity," James said, moving closer to her chair. "There's a foundation that Sarah and I established. Before she died, it provides emergency assistance to families facing medical crises, especially when education is at stake. Tommy's situation qualifies for support." Ruby stared at him through fresh tears. "Sarah was your wife?" "Yes, she died of cancer 3 years ago. Before she passed, she made me promise to use our resources to help others, especially families with children who needed advocates. She would have liked you very much," James continued. "She would have seen in you the same strength and selflessness that made her so special." Ruby felt something break open in her chest. "James, I'm so sorry about how I reacted. I was scared and overwhelmed, and I took it out on you." You had every right to be upset, James replied. I should have trusted you from the beginning. I should have realized that someone with your integrity wouldn't be swayed by money. Tommy stirred in his hospital bed, opening his eyes to find his sister surrounded by strangers. Ruby? What's happening? These are friends, Ruby said, squeezing his hand. They're here to help. The wedding by the sea. 6 months later, Ruby stood on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Wearing a simple white dress and holding a bouquet of wildflowers that Lily and Lucy had helped her pick that morning, the ceremony was small and intimate, attended only by family and close friends who had supported them through their journey. Dr. Foster sat in the front row next to Tommy, who had fully recovered and was preparing to start college in the fall. With a full scholarship funded by the Sarah Mitchell Foundation, Hannah Brooks served as Ruby's maid of honor. They're still teasing her about claiming she didn't have time for dating. Robert Kim stood beside James as his best man. Having watched his friend transform over the past year from a lonely widower into a man who had learned to love again, even Margaret Stone was present, having gradually warmed to Ruby. After seeing how devoted she was to the twins and how much joy she brought to James's life, Detective Mike Walsh officiated the ceremony, having become ordained online specifically for this occasion. As he spoke about love conquering differences and families being built through choice as much as blood, Ruby felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the path that had led her to this moment. James, do you take Ruby to be your wife, to love and support her dreams, to build a family together based on respect, honesty, and shared values? I do, James replied, his voice steady and sure. Ruby, do you take James to be your husband, to love him and his daughters as your own family, to face whatever challenges come with courage and grace? I do, Ruby whispered, looking at the man who had seen her worth from the very beginning. When they kissed, Lily and Lucy cheered loudly, running forward to hug their new stepmother. Ruby lifted them both, spinning them around as they giggled with delight. Does this mean you'll live in our big house now? Lucy asked. It means we'll make it a home, Ruby replied. All of us together. As the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Ruby reflected on how different her life had become since that first evening at Rosewood Diner. She had gained not just a husband, but daughters who filled her heart with laughter. She had finished her degree and started working for the Sarah Mitchell Foundation, helping other families navigate crises and build better futures. James watched his new wife dance with his daughters on the clifftop, their joy infectious and pure. He thought about Sarah, about the love they had shared, and the blessing she had given him to find happiness again. He knew she would approve of Ruby, would see in her the same dedication to family and service that had defined their own marriage. Thank you, James whispered to the wind, hoping Sarah could hear him. Thank you for sending us exactly what we needed. Ruby caught his eye and smiled, extending her hand to invite him into their impromptu dance circle. As he joined them, spinning and laughing under the stars, James realized that some of life's greatest gifts come disguised as ordinary moments. A dinner at a simple diner, a conversation over coffee, a choice to trust despite fear.